What does God want from you? Or what does God need from you? What does God command of you? Or what do you command of yourself? So many questions! Hey, Rabbi Litwak.
Rabbi David, long time
I'm dancing.
no see.
I am really excited to talk with you today. We were just talking before we got on that this is a struggle for me personally. I really struggle with these ideas. But just to set the scene, Shavuot is coming. We have been counting the Omer up to this moment. Is it next weekend?
Next weekend.
Next weekend.
Saturday night.
So Shavuot is the commemoration, the celebration of when we got the Torah from God on Mount Sinai. And every word in there could be defined differently by different people. But for the sake of simplicity, I'll just say that. We got our physical freedom on Pesach, on Passover, and we have walked into Mount Sinai to obtain our spiritual freedom. And the question that I am hoping you can help me with today is, what is the nature of commandedness today for modern Jews today? And I'll just say one other thing before you kick this off, and that is I just want to kind of lay my preconceived notions on the table. And that is that I grew up, not my whole growing up, but for my formative years, I grew up in the Orthodox world. And for me, commanded by God means you do it. And if you don't do it, then you're sinning. And that's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, I've committed lots of sins in my life, right? We all do. It's impossible to follow all 613 mitzvot.
Not me.
Not you. No, not you. So that's the baggage that I'm coming into this with. That there is a. I approach this whole question with baggage. Let me just start there. But why don't we start with the idea of mitzvah? What can you tell us about the whole idea of mitzvah?
Okay, so let's first start with Happy Shavuot, Hag Sameach.
Sorry, I got right into the therapy session. I didn't
yes,
even.
That's okay. That's all right. And the truth is, and I say this a lot, so people may have already heard this from me, is Shavuot for me is the Rodney Dangerfield of Jewish holidays. It gets no respect.
Oh.
Okay? Thank you very much.
I like that.
This should be like our major holiday. Okay? If Torah is the organizing principle of Jewish life, okay, the holiday in which we receive that Torah, right, should be it. Okay? It should be. Yes, we got out of Egypt, we're free people, but we know that freedom is not a freedom to do whatever we want. We've talked about that before, but rather it is the freedom to take on obligations outside of human masters, but a divine master. And there's where we got to start our conversation. So let's start with the question that you started with, which is the notion of mitzvah.
Before you do that, because what you just said in and of itself strikes me as strange. The freedom to choose obligation. I don't know, those three words, freedom, choose, and obligation, seem not antithetical, but they just, I don't know how they fit together.
Sure.
And by the way, before we go any farther, we should say hi to Mom, because she's here watching. From Florida? She's in Florida?
Yes, my mother's in Florida.
That's so nice. Hi,
That's
Maxine.
right.
Okay, I apologize. Rabbi,
All right.
how do those three things fit together?
Because if you are a slave, right, you neither have freedom nor choice, right? When you stop being a slave to a human master who controls your life, right, and you open yourself up, right, to free will that God has given you, then you have choice. And you have a choice to obligate yourself, right? Whether God commanded, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in a minute, whether God commanded us through these mitzvot, or whether these mitzvot were made up by a bunch of ancient human beings with no divine connection whatsoever, doesn't matter in in terms of my ability to make a decision. Am I going to do this or am I not going to do this?
So, could we talk about that decision for a moment? And I agree with you. Let's put off from whence these mitzvot came for just a moment. But
Okay.
so we make the decision. I, as a liberal Jew, make the decision to either be obligated or not obligated. If I choose to not be obligated, let me change my question. Sorry. Are there ramifications? Are there consequences? What does it mean for me to choose to be obligated or not obligated? What does it mean? Let me stop there.
It either puts you within the community or it doesn't put you within the community.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Look, the obligations of being a citizen of the United States, right? If I choose not to follow those laws, right, and I don't even have to follow all of them, right, or for that matter, the traditions, okay? If I don't eat apple pie and I don't call my mother and I don't watch fireworks on 4th of July, am I out of the community? No, not really. Right? But I'm certainly not in the community. Okay? If I choose to not follow the laws that have been laid out by the community, am I out of the community? No, but I'm not really in it either. Right? And there may come a point where, when I choose not to do those things, the ramifications are that society is going to take me out of the community. I'm going to be removed, and I'm going to be put in jail and no longer within society.
Dems fighting words from a Reform rabbi. I mean, the idea that if someone chooses not to be obligated to mitzvot, that they may not be part of a community?
Yeah, because now we have to get to mitzvah and we have to get to what are what is that corpus, right?
Right.
So let's start with too often we translate the word mitzvah from its Yiddish context as good deed. Okay, like do a mitzvah, take take the trash out. Okay, and you may be commanding your child, but most people don't understand the meaning of mitzvah as commandment. Right? They think this is a group of these are a bunch of things that we do because it makes us feel good
Yeah, they're
or makes
good
other
deeds,
people
right?
feel
Good
good
deeds.
deeds.
Yeah.
Right? And then we get to uh, something like fasting on Yom Kippur or eating matzah on Pesach, and I say, what's so good about it? It's not
Right.
exactly helping a little old lady across the street.
Right.
Right?
Putting tefillin on in the morning.
Yeah, what is good or
Right.
bad about it? It's neutral.
my daughter. Sorry, my daughter's in Israel now, and when her first experience, I mean, she's been many times, but her first experience on the way to Israel was in the El Al terminal. Chabad was wrapping all the boys up on her birthright trip in tefillin, right?
Yeah.
For certain members of our Jewish community, tefillin is, I mean, talk about a mitzvah, right? Or talis, or kashrut, keeping kosher, or any of those.
So did she go up to?
I told her to. I told her, I said, can you go up and ask them if they'll wrap you? That's exactly what I asked her to do. I don't know if she did.
All right. So the fact is that mitzvah means commandment. Right? I don't think about it as necessarily commandment, because I struggle with the notion of a commander. It's hard to talk about mitzvah as commandment if we don't have a conversation about commandedness, about who is the commander. Right?
So who is the commander? We're not there yet? Because
we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Okay.
Stick with me. Okay. But if I do believe that a mitzvah is a sacred obligation, right? And that obligation falls on me as a member of the community, right? And that is what defines me as a Jew, right? There are plenty of people, okay, that their mother was Jewish, their father was Jewish, and if they went into an Orthodox synagogue, they could show them their little Jewish passport and say, "Here you go, I'm Jewish." Okay? Do they know anything? No. Have they been raised in a Jewish home? No. Have they expressed their Judaism in any way, shape, or form? No. Okay? But by virtue of DNA, they get to define themselves as Jewish. I have a harder time with that. I believe that mitzvot, those sacred obligations, are the things that define us as a Jew.
Yeah.
And
so,
yes, we need to do those.
But as you were speaking, I'm thinking about people that I know who do express their Judaism. They light candles, or they use Hebrew, or whatever. They do lots of different mitzvot, but they don't see them or think of them as obligations.
Yep.
So, and I'm using obligation because that's the word that you used. I'm not sure what the difference between commanded and obligation is, but although I like what you said about when we talk about commandedness, we have to talk about who the commander is. That's very powerful. So how much of this is just the kavanah, the intention that we bring to it?
Right. And do we get to make choices about which of the mitzvot we do and which we don't?
Right.
Okay. Now, again, so here let's go a little bit deeper into the notion of mitzvah, and talk about the fact that those mitzvot, okay, what I will now define as halakha, okay, the legal framework of which mitzvot are a part, that is developmental. And it is a changing phenomenon. Okay? If we look at the mitzvot in the Torah, okay, there's a whole slew of them that we choose not to do. Okay? And some people will say, well, we don't do sacrifices because we no longer have a temple in Jerusalem. Okay? If we were serious, okay, we could have a temple in Jerusalem. Okay? And even if we didn't have a temple in Jerusalem, there were times where we were doing sacrifices outside of a temple in Jerusalem. Okay? So why aren't we doing those?
Right. Because, and by the way, the word halakha itself, sorry to interrupt, the word halakha itself is another one of these wonderful words, because on the one hand, halakha means the way, it's definitive. On the other hand, the word itself is a word about movement. Halakha, you're walking. So it's another one of those things that it's this beautiful, this sacred tension that we get to struggle with, which is there. This is my mind speaking, not yours. There is the way, and the way sometimes is over here, sometimes it's over there. Right? It's a moving target in many
That's
ways.
exactly right, which is what I was going to suggest is that not only is the halakha developmental and ever changing, but it is also pluralistic. Right? And that is all we need to do is look at the Talmud, right, to say there there is a whole tradition of differing opinions, okay, and that we are allowed to have to use either one of them.
So yes, and let me push back on that. If whoever said this and taught this initially is watching, forgive me, I don't remember your name, but I remember reading somewhere, I think it was just in a Facebook comment, that because I make that exact argument, right? The Talmud, the entire basis for Judaism is about machloket. It's about disagreement and discussion and debate.
Right.
The argument against that is that's if you're stuck in the Talmud, then yes. If you're stuck in the rabbinic period, up until whatever 600 CE, then yes. But you can't ignore what came after that, which is all the codifications of law. That nowadays we don't really have a very pluralistic, from a traditional mindset, a very pluralistic way of thinking about halakha. We have Moshe Isserles, or we have Yosef Karo, or we have Rambam, who told us, no, this is what you do.
Because there has been an ossification of Judaism until the Reform movement said, let us be historically correct. Let us Wissenschaft des Judentums. We should study it, our history as a serious topic, and understand that over thousands of years we have changed.
Okay,
and
so
that is a reflection of our time and our situation.
So is that it? Does reform, not really just reform, but liberal Judaism, is that kind of a repudiation of the codes of Judaism? I mean, it is the argument we're better off in the Talmudic frame.
Yes, because Judaism is a dynamic and not a static faith. It's one that has never been in a state of being, but always in a state of becoming.
Yeah.
Torah is not frozen like ice in it, but is rather a soluble solution, right? And there is a problem with that. I'm gonna go the other extreme, right? And that is that I believe in the pliability of Judaism. Okay? The problem with that is that where are the parameters? Where is the fence? Okay? There's got to be some ideological cohesion in order to ensure continuity. So I'm going to argue against this and say Rabbi Gunther Plaut, one of the great Reform rabbis of the 20th century, says we're constantly widening the borders of Judaism in the name of tolerance and openness, that today we've reached the point where reform becomes a determinative noun and Judaism is a descriptive adjective. Okay? That is to say, we're stressing reform at the expense of Judaism.
Is that like when the conservative movement years ago had what was it? Tradition and change. That was sort of their mantra, right?
Yeah.
The two sides of the coin. And
that's because they were historically trying to find the middle path between tradition, orthodoxy, and change, reform.
But is that what you're saying? That Gunther Plaut is saying is that the reform versus Judaism?
yes, I'm suggesting that reform can't swing the pendulum so far that it's only about reform. It's only about change.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
If it's only about change, then we lose some framework, right, that holds us together.
You know, Rabbi, the other night we were celebrating Lag BaOmer, and one of our parents asked me if the marshmallows were going to be kosher, and I
Okay.
explained that they weren't. And she asked me, how can that be? And I explained to her that in both Reform and Conservative Judaism, that we've decided collectively that the gelatin that's used is okay because it's davar acher, because it's considered it's something completely different from what it started out as. And the way you just described that was making me think that if we spend too much time in the reform, we end up with a davar acher, right? The Judaism that we're trying desperately to reform and make relevant becomes something completely different than what it started out as.
Right. So now we've gone from uh, the need for halakha to be, on one hand, pliable, changing, developmental, pluralistic, in that there's an allowance of multiplicity of ideas. All right, and you've got, right, on the other end, you have a concern or a challenge that if it's all about change, then we're going to end up too far over and we're not in the picture. Right? So, what becomes the the mitzvah? What becomes the obligation? Are there certain mitzvot that we're all going to agree we have to stick to, and others, you want to keep that, you don't want to keep that. Okay, I think that that has that has actually, within the reform movement, has swung the pendulum. Right? So if we think back, we go back to the Pittsburgh platform in 1885, not the earliest, but the second of the major platforms, ideological platforms on which the reform movement has based itself. We have, very famously, we recognize within, in the Mosaic legislation, a system of training the Jewish people for their mission, and don't quote me exactly, for its mission during its national life in Palestine. Okay, because in 1885 there was no Israel; it was called Palestine. Okay, in other words, okay, these laws that we found in the Torah were meant for a time in history when the Jews were going to live sovereign within the land of Israel. And in 1885, that's not the case. And so, therefore, the Pittsburgh platform continues, we accept as binding only the moral laws and maintain only such ceremonies as elevate and sanctify our lives, but reject all those who are not adapted to our current habits and views of modern society. Okay? So they've taken the corpus and they've said, these,
Right.
they're gone. These, we're going to hold on to. Okay, that's an attempt. Let's go literally 114 years later to right back to Pittsburgh, actually. And I was in these meetings in 1999,
Mm.
where the latest of our of the reform movement's principles, platforms, was written, called the Statement of Principles. Okay, and watch how this has changed. Okay. In 1999, it says that we affirm that Torah is the foundation of Jewish life. Okay. Up until that point, we did not affirm that. in any of the other ones. We cherish the truths,
But
revealed in Torah. Go
quick
ahead.
question: when you
Sure.
say that wasn't affirmed prior, do you think it was not affirmed because it was assumed, or was it not
I find
affirmed?
it possible. It is possible.
Okay.
Right. Um, what I think is interesting is what really wasn't in any previous uh, platform was the notion that Torah was God's revelation to the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, that may have been assumed, but not until 1999 do we say that we cherish the truths revealed in Torah, God's ongoing revelation to our people on the record of our people's ongoing relationship to with God. Okay, now here's the key. We are committed to the ongoing study of the whole array of mitzvot and to the fulfillment of those that address us as individuals and as a community. Some of these mitzvot, sacred obligations, okay, have been long observed by Reform Jews. Others, both ancient and modern, demand renewed attention as a result of the unique context of our own times.
Yeah.
We now have a willingness to take the entire corpus and look at it and be able to make those choices.
That in the first half of that, where it says, um, some of these, I forgive, I don't
Some of
remember.
these mitzvot, okay,
Some of these are relevant for action, but all of them, it said at one point, are
we're
worthy of our
committed to the
study.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're committed to the ongoing study of the whole array of mitzvot.
And I have
Correct.
to say that makes me feel much better, because in the original platform, it seems to me to be so dismissive of tradition and history, to say, yeah, I don't like that. So not only am I not going to do it, I'm going to pretend like it's not there. I'm going to ignore it.
Yes, I would agree with that. There was certainly a throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but keep in mind that the people who were doing that, right, knew their Judaism. They
Right.
knew what they were getting rid
Right.
of, right? And now, 5, 6, 7 generations later, people don't. And also, we've come to recognize that there are certain things that maybe may have value that didn't have value 100 years ago.
Right. The problem with them knowing it, you're right. They made those decisions from a place of knowledge and wisdom. And in fact, that is I think the backbone of liberal Judaism, Reform Judaism in particular, is that we make thoughtful, educated choices. The problem with those people making that choice is that while they may be knowledgeable about it, I may not be. And their choice is going to rob me of an opportunity to find a mitzvah that is perhaps meaningful to me.
Right.
And that has changed now. Now Reform Judaism is saying it's all there. Some of these feel more resonant to us than others, but we're not going to hide anything from you.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
So let me, I'm watching our time,
Yeah.
and I want to get back to
Who done
the
it?
who done it. Right? Who is the commander? Right? And I think for a lot of people, the commander, right, is only one, right? And that is God. Right? So I'm not discounting that. I think that, right, for us to be commanded by a commander God is there's nothing wrong with that. That is our that if I see God as a divine being who gave us this corpus, then as you started with, I need to take that seriously. Okay? But I don't think that that works for everybody. Okay? Um, for those who don't have that same feeling of a personal God who plays a role in history, I think though that there is still a role for mitzvot and for being commanded. So I want to give three ways for us to think about commandedness. Okay? The first is we're going to call the commanding voice of history. Okay? For some people, the commanding voice comes from the past. Okay? We may ask ourselves, who am I to turn away from 4,000 years of devoted ancestors and tradition? Okay? I'm not going to be the weak link in the chain. Okay? And I think that there is something to that. Okay? The commanding voice of history can be quite powerful, certainly powerful enough to claim us. Okay? At the other end, or at the other end of the spectrum, I think there's the commanding voice of the present tense community. Okay? We can ask ourselves, okay, what will friends and families think of me if I don't follow a certain set of laws, if I don't live by a certain ethic? Okay? Today's emphasis on individuality teaches us that doing something for the sake of what our neighbors will think or say is false, hollow, backward somehow. But in the eyes of our tradition, of Jewish tradition, caring about the community and one's place in it, I think is a core value. There's a difference between doing something for our neighbor's sake and doing something for the sake of being a good neighbor. Okay? Community standards can keep us honest and on the right track. That's our second one. And the third one is the commanding voice of the future. Okay? For others, that commanding voice comes from our children and our grandchildren who make us want to be better and better. Okay? Um, I think that we look at being exemplars of walking the walk and talking the talk. And that we create that pathway of mitzvot because that's what we want to make sure we pass on to future generations. So those are four options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I think that one of the pieces that I will continue to think about and struggle with over this Shavuot is that kavanah piece, that intention piece. And what is there value in us imagining ourselves being commanded, period, and then being commanded by something other than myself? Being commanded by myself, or it feels like I want to do it. One of the things that
Yeah, I think I wouldn't. I don't even struggle with that because if it's only about me, and what I want to do or what I don't want to do,
right.
I can forgive myself very quickly.
Yeah. I learned about tzedakah, that one of the questions, I think it was actually Danny Siegel, the poet and teacher, once taught, why is tzedakah, justice, charity, why is that a mitzvah, right? I mean, we all like giving people other things and doing good for other people. Why does that have to be a mitzvah? And the answer was that he gave, I believe it was him, is that if on Monday I'm feeling good and I'm wanting to help someone, great. But what if I'm not feeling that way on Tuesday? Does that mean because I'm not feeling that tug that I don't have to give? And his answer was, no, you have to give on Tuesday too.
Just because you had a bad week,
Right.
I should suffer. All
Right.
right,
Right.
from Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah. We human beings need to be pushed, to be challenged, to be sometimes told what to do. And so that to me is a covenant, it's an intention, it's a value that I think we would do better to embrace within liberal Judaism without giving up that personal autonomy that is fundamental to who we are.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
100%.
What are we doing for Shavuot here?
So Saturday night, June 4th, we're doing something called Torah Mi Sinai, this Sinai or that Sinai. Rabbi, I am going to
Wait, I'm bringing it up right now.
You're bringing it up. All right.
I'm getting the flyer. I didn't
Well,
think to have
I'll
this.
talk about it, and then you'll see why the flyer looks the way it does. All right.
Can I zoom in?
Okay, there you go. This is a program that Cantor Norman and I are putting together to talk about things in our tradition that came from Sinai, from Mount Sinai 4,000 years ago, and then things that we think came from Sinai, but actually came a few years ago, and we think about them as traditional because that's what we grew up with, or that's what it's the last thing that we remember. What's a tradition? Anything that we've done 3 times. That's it's as if we came from straight from Moses. Straight from God.
There were so many times when I was a congregational rabbi when I would change the tune for Adon Olam, and congregants would have a fit. They'd lose their minds.
Shalom,
right?
God forbid. So he's going to be doing some music. I'm going to be doing some traditions. We'll play a little game about how old is this tradition, and how old is this tune, and so that's our program. But we're actually starting with like an Israeli dairy dinner. We're going to do quiche. We're going to do blintzes. We're going to do barekas. We're going to do salad. It will be delicious to the stomach and to the soul.
I was just going to say, feeding our minds and our bodies. Yeah,
that's it.
Rabbi, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi David. Thank you all.
See you on Shabbat, and hopefully all of you on Shavuot. And Marika, it's good to see you here. And Maxine, good to see you here, and everyone who's watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.